Hello, 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 everybody. I am Tiffany Webb. I am the Director of Product Marketing and Events here at Flatiron School. Been with Flatiron about 3 years now. And yeah, a big part of my job is to host events like the one we are having this evening, Intro to CSS and CSS Animations. I am just waiting for my colleague Jelani to get back to the mic, and he'll intro our instructor for the evening. But in the meantime, I'll go over some housekeeping for those of you in New York City and those of you here in the virtual world. Let's start with, let's be kind to one another. It's a really crazy time. Be kind to each other in the chat or in the audience. Be kind to our instructor. He has put together an entire lesson for you guys this evening. And be kind to Jelani and myself as we are navigating in-person and virtual events. So we'll try to get around to all of your questions, but we might miss a few. So if we do, just resurface that question in the Q&A or chat, or raise your hand in the audience. But I'll pass it over to you, Jelani, to take care of the rest.
Welcome to the Intro to CSS and CSS Animation. Welcome to those of you joining us virtually. Welcome to those of you that decided to spend your afternoon with us at our New York City campus. We truly appreciate that. My name is Jelani. I am the product marketing manager for data science, but that does not mean I do not love software engineering just as equal. I love all my disciplines just the same. Again, housekeeping rules, just make sure we use the chat as an audience. We're gonna try to monitor the chat as well as we can. For folks in person, don't feel like you can't ask a question. If you have a question, just raise your hand. We'll get to it, and we'll repeat it for folks online as well. So without further ado, let's jump right in, right? So let's get to the main event. Introducing one of our heavily esteemed software engineering instructors, Mr. Chet Tiller.
Thank you, Jelani. Hello, everybody. Hey to all those folks who are online. Hey to those folks who are here in New York City. My name is Chet Tiller. I am, as Jelani said, I'm one of the instructors here. I've been working for about 2 years. I primarily teach on the online team, as just about everybody's online these days, so I know what that feels like. Today, we're going to be talking primarily about CSS and CSS animations. The idea behind this is that we're going to be kind of like starting with, okay, like how do we even like do CSS? How do we like take an HTML page and transform that into something that has styling, that looks gorgeous to look at, and just like kind of go from there. If you have questions, for those folks who are in New York City, feel free to raise your hand. I will probably see you first, just because that's how it is. If you are online, feel free to ask those questions, and Jelani will let me know. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick screen share. And let me know if you are not able to see my screen.
It looks good for me, Chet.
Looks good to you? Beautiful. Let's move this thing out of the way. Oh, I'm not allowed to. Okay, that's fine. Awesome. So let's go ahead and get started. For those folks who are joining us, how many of you have like worked in HTML before? How many of you have like looked at HTML before? You? Yeah.
And for those of you online, feel free to answer in the chat as well.
Yeah, how many folks online have had a chance to work in HTML and play around with HTML before?
Getting a lot of yeses and me's and yeps. I haven't for a few years. I'm practicing HTML.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a few people who have done it previously, who might have been a few years. If you are not super familiar with HTML, that's totally fine. We'll be talking a little bit about the HTML that is being built right here. Primarily what I'm going to be doing is like sharing techniques for y'all. If you want to code along, feel free to do that. If you already have like a piece of HTML that you want to style, that's also okay. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to our HTML file, and this HTML file, you can open it up in a wide variety of things. For example, if you already have something like Atom or VS Code, you can open it up in that, or you can open it up in just like a plain old text editor. That's totally fine too. I personally am using something called Atom. It's nice. It's an IDE that like allows me to see like, oh, all these beautiful colors right here. That being said, like I said, if you're using it with just like a normal old text editor, that's fine too. The very first thing that we want to do is, well, build out our HTML. And I've built a lot of HTML right here already. There's all sorts of stuff here, like a nav bar, that we've got a little form right here. We've got like a bunch of divs with these like images and stuff like that in here. And you don't have to have all this stuff. You can like build it as we're kind of like playing around with it. By just like, I've really just created like a playground for us to like start doing some styling.
Hey, Chet, I'm sorry to interrupt. Yes. Is it possible for you to drop that link for this file in either Slack for me or in the chat?
Yes, I can do that. The file itself.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. That's something that we could have coordinated on, but I can for the moment just pass this over to, let's see if I can open up the chat.
Yeah,
I'm worried that this
you can also use VS Code. That's, I think, is fine for this.
Yeah, 100%. VS Code is great.
It's usually what people prefer, right? Some people like Code Sandbox, some people like VS Code.
Yeah.
That might not like, okay. There's no link to this page specifically, or is this just like a different editor, text editor?
Well, I mean, this is, are you asking about this HTML file particularly?
Yeah, so like, is there a link to what you're showing on the screen that the audience can play around with as well? If not, we can kind of just follow along.
Okay, I mean, I can create something that people can download in about 5 minutes if y'all want to take like a quick 5 minute, or we can just keep going. How are people feeling? The first thing? All right, sounds good. Okay. All right, so give me 2 minutes. I'm gonna push this up to GitHub, and you'll be able to copy and paste this directly from GitHub into your own files.
Perfect. And I don't know if I mean, for Sarah who asked, are there advantages of Atom over VS Code? I think it's a personal, and I can let Chet talk about that once he gets the GitHub stuff going. I think it's a personal option. From Atom, I am noticing that it's like really nicely colored, so that might be something that you're interested in. Yeah. But I think it's a personal choice, like where you like to do your coding or your
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It's up to personal choice. VS Code comes with a lot of stuff already prepackaged, which is really nice. That being said, Atom, you can do a lot of customization. There's all this like kind of hidden stuff that you can do in order to make it like look more customized, look exactly how you want it. It really just depends on, you know, what you want to do with it.
Thank you for doing this, Chet. I think people really learn by also doing, so yeah, this might be helpful. For those of you who may have just joined online, we're just making sure that you guys can get access to the code via GitHub so that you can Cool. Sorry about that.
All right, I've got a file ready for those folks who are on Zoom, and for those folks who are here, this at the very top is going to be the web address for it, if you're able to see that. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, it's github.com/bruchetta, spelled BREWCHETTA/intro-2-CSS. And from there, you should be able to click into index.html, and I'll drop that in the chat for those folks who want to take a look at that.
Thank you, Chet. All right. There we go. And if it's possible, can you make your, if we're going to be using this bruschetta, can you make your screen just a little bit bigger? Oop, there we go. Yeah, that was the feedback we were worried about.
That was the feedback. Okay, perfect. Yeah, let me know if anybody is having any issues. Otherwise, we good to continue. We've created a new HTML file for this code that we're going to create.
All right.
All right, cool. So we're going to go ahead and continue.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, download that into your text editor. Yeah. Copy and paste that into your text editor. You want that to be a new .html file, like very specifically a .html file, so that when we start looking at it on your browser will be able to read that. Mm-hmm. So the question was, why is this a globe in Atom? The reason is just because I have a special Atom package that changes it to a globe. If you're ever interested in Atom packages, you can just like click on, not packages up here. If you do control comma or command comma, you'll be able to see like all these like new things that you can install. And if you are curious about which package that is, we can definitely talk about this afterwards. Okay. Cool. Awesome. So let's go ahead and dive in. So CSS, this is like how we style things. Does anybody actually know what CSS stands for? Like what that's an acronym for? Cascading style sheets, right on. So CSS is a cascading style sheet. Style sheet, that more or less makes sense. And hopefully the cascading part is gonna like make sense in just a minute. In order to create a link to our style sheet, how do we go about doing that? Well, actually, before we even begin, let's talk about creating that style sheet. So next to your index.html file, create a new file. And this is going to be, you can call it style.css. You can technically call it whatever you want to .css. I tend to call it style.css so we know exactly what's going on. And for now, that can just be a blank file. So once you've got that all set up, for any folks who have kind of jumped into this beforehand, how do we go about linking to our style sheet? If anybody has any ideas. That's all good. We're all beginners
Yeah,
here.
we got some people in the chat. Link REL, link tag within the header, link REL =, style sheet.
Yeah. So in order to create a link, generally you'll put this link up in the head. You generally want to do some of these like invisible links and like things like that inside the head for your HTML file. And you want to say link rel = style sheet so that it knows that this is going to be a style sheet. And then we have an href, and this href is going to be the path that basically says, hey, this is where my style sheet is located on my computer. If you put your style sheet right next to your index.html file, you can literally just say style.css. Yeah, this is what we're typing in right now. So any questions on that, or we good to go?
I think we're good. There is a question though, is rel = in quotations optional? Or do you need to include that link rel = partial?
I don't, here's the truth is I've never actually tried it without the rel equals. If somebody has an answer, I'd be curious to know. I've always included it just because like my editor automatically includes it. So I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. But if you found that it is not necessary, let me know. I'm curious. You had a question? Okay. And also, if this is a little bit too zoomed out, I can zoom in a little bit as well, if anybody's having trouble seeing. Yes, okay. Beautiful. Awesome. So we have our style sheet all set up. We have a link to it, and now it's time for us to actually take a look at what the HTML page looks like. So we can, if we want to, open this style sheet, or sorry, open this HTML page in any editor, or sorry, any browser that you want to. If you have Google Chrome, you can open it up there. If you have Firefox, you can open it up there. The easiest way that I've often found to do this is if we go to, you know, whatever your file manager is. In this case, I use Dolphin, but you know, it might be like Windows Explorer or whatever. Navigate to wherever your file is. In this case, like index.html right here. And you can generally just double click that, and that will open up inside of your editor, or sorry, I keep saying editor, your browser of choice. And there it is. It's beautiful, right? This is gorgeous. We can really see the grass right here. We've got a puppy, we've got a raccoon, we've got a fox. Yeah, this is great. So this is what our HTML is going to look like unstyled. And at this point, we want to add a little bit of styling, right? Just to pause for a sec, is anybody having issues opening up their HTML page? Yeah.
I'm not getting any online, but there are a lot of, there's a lot of commentary around the rel topic. So that's good. People are, you know, are conspiring online. It's great.
Awesome. It's a blank page for you? Okay. Did you save the Atom file?
Also, just so you know, chat, someone removed the rel = and it broke their tutorial page. Looks like it's necessary. So that's a good thing about coding. You have to try things to see, you know, if it works or not. So thank you, Demetrius.
Gotcha. I don't know. It doesn't seem to have broken mine, but I absolutely believe it. yeah, one of the best things that you can do as a coder is just try things. Like if you're curious, just be like, oh, okay, let's intentionally try to break this. It's a great way to learn. It's a great way to see like the boundaries of the system that you're working with. So now that we have set up our rel, our link, our HTML page, we are all ready to go, and we need to start styling this thing. So the very first thing that I want to teach y'all is just very basic. Let's say that this H1 right here, we want to center it. We want to put it in the center of the screen, and we want it to be a completely different color. Simple, right? The very first thing that you always have to do for CSS is you have to use a selector. The selector is the thing that says, hey, I want to apply styling to this thing. If I'm looking inside index.html, I scroll down a little bit, we can see that this header is being contained in this H1 tag. So naturally, if I want to style an H1, I just type in H1 right here, and that's our selector. That's the thing that we need. After we've typed in H1, we use these curly brackets, and all of our CSS rules go right here. So if I wanted to change anything, and you can actually experiment a lot with like the different different rules and what they do, but I specifically want to change the color of this H1. So I'm gonna start typing out color. Oh yeah, it tells me color right here. And who has a favorite color that they really want to see up here? Okay. I heard a green.
Yeah, we got a green in the chat too.
Green, chat likes green. Beautiful. So it's not going to immediately update. In order to make this work, this will be a test of whether or not our link to our style sheet is working. If I hit this refresh button, I should now see some green text. So is anybody having issues seeing like a differently colored text for this? Yep. It's just not working.
It worked in the chat. Also, someone said, I use pink. I'm glad but I hope you chose whatever color you want, and
yeah,
that it
choose
worked.
whatever color makes you happy. You can 100% do pink. CSS actually has a lot of really weird random colors. I think that you can use like Azure.
Yeah, someone used sienna, which is nice.
Sienna. Ooh, that is a color. If you're using an IDE like Atom or VS Code, it will actually change whenever you get a color like this, it'll actually change color so that it's like a feedback for you that this is actually working. All right. Didn't work? All right, I'm gonna go check out this code for about 2 seconds. I'll be right back.
Yeah. And then those of you on the chat, is everyone keeping up well? This is our first foray into a hybrid event. So we want to make sure that, you know, the people in the audience and those of you on the virtual website are also keeping up. Awesome. Chat, we're getting some easy to follows here. That's great. That's great news. Awesome. As we're moving back into the world, we want to, you know, host some in-person events. So if you live in a city where there is a Flatiron School campus, be on the lookout for events like this in the future. Sorry about that, John. There was a note in the event itself that you would need some HTML and CSS. I'll make sure though for any downloads later that we will have all the information for you, but you will be getting this recording within 24 hours, everyone, both in person and online. So you can always go back and run through Chet's instructions, and Chet's back. So there you go.
I am back. Disaster averted. What's up? Sorry. Yeah, that's actually a great question. With CSS, if you want to, sorry.
Yeah, can you repeat
yeah.
the question? Sorry.
So the question was, correct me if I'm wrong, is there any way to do comments in CSS? In order to do a comment in CSS, this thing at the very top is actually a comment right here. You do the slash, the star, and you end it with a star and a slash. One of the shortcuts that you can actually do in an IDE like Atom or VS Code, this depends on whether you're Mac or Windows, but I know that with Windows, if you do Control ? It'll immediately comment out that line for you. And the whole idea behind comments is that these are things that the code is not actually going to read. So you can type whatever you want to inside of them. And that way you can like leave notes for yourself. Yeah, great question. All right, awesome. So we have added a color. See, I forgot that I changed this to Sienna. We have made our H1 Sienna. And the next thing that we want to do, if we're looking at the page, I want this to be centered. There's actually a very easy way for us to center these things, at least when it comes to text. Right here, if I start typing out text, we can see that it gives me this text align. And here we can do all number of different things. In my case, I want it to be centered, so I just say center. Oops. One very quick syntactic thing, make sure that you end all of these with a semicolon. Otherwise, it will break the CSS. But the weird thing about CSS is that it won't actually tell you that it's breaking. It'll just like break and pretend that everything's okay. So make sure that you have these semicolons at the end. So now when we go back to now when we go back to our HTML page in the browser, if I hit refresh, we've got our nice Sienna H1 tag right there, smack dab in the middle. So any questions about that before we keep on moving?
Nothing on virtual.
You all good? Cool. Awesome. So this is how we are able to like grab these specific elements and say, hey, I want to add some styling to you, H1 tag right here. I want to make you this specific color. I want to make sure that you're centered. What happens, however, if we wanted to, I have like 1, 2, 3, I have a bunch of divs in here. And it's kind of like, if I decide that I want to add styling to a div, let's do something nice. Let's give this a border. With borders, you want to give them 3 different attributes. The first is like, is this like a dotted line? Is this like a solid border? You know, something like that. I'm going to use solid just to make it, you know, very obvious that this is a border. The second is whatever the color is. I'd like to, we can go with Sienna again, actually, if we want to. And then the third thing that you want is how wide is that border? Like, what is the border width? If I do like 100 pixels, it's just gonna be like massive. But if I wanted to just make it kind of subtle, we can just say like 3px, and that stands for pixel width. And this border will be about 3 pixels wide. I'm doing this for div right here. And because I'm doing this for div, it is going to look at all of my divs. So this is a div, this is a div, this is a div. It's going to look at all of my divs and apply that to all of them. So It's kind of hard to see with these, but if I scroll down, yeah, you can see that's around this lorem ipsum quote. You can see that's around this lorem ipsum quote. We can see that there's a div that's surrounding this fox along with this like caption down here. This is really nice if we want to mass apply this to a certain piece of HTML, but it's not helpful if we want to like very specifically say, hey, I want you, this one piece of HTML, to have that applied to it. So we're going to do something a little bit different for, let's say, for one of these divs down here.
Got it. That was going to be the question that I was going to ask from Jennifer. If you want a specific div, you need to use its class or give it a class, question mark?
Yes, 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 yes. So if you want to use a specific div, let's say that, okay, we've got this very first div and I have applied a class to it. The way that you apply a class is you just say class equals, you know, whatever. There are some conventions around how you name classes. Generally, you want to add these dashes in between them. You want them to be lowercase, but if you don't do that, generally it's not going to break. So we have, as you've pointed out, we do have a class applied to this div. And if I want to grab a div just by its class, so I have this class, which is actually being applied 3 times, which is actually going to be fine. These other ones don't have that. If I just want to apply to these 3 divs that have images, actually, I already forgot the name, image container. We do the same thing, but we append it with this period right here at the front. And this is a selector for specific like classes. And this will get applied to every class or every HTML element that has that class. So we could do something fun here. Let's see, all of these have images. Now let's give these divs like a different color border. Let's give them a nice dotted border. This will be red, and we'll just crank up the pixels, so 5 pixels. And when I head over to here, once I hit that refresh, I should now see these red dotted lines surrounding my images and their captions. That isn't being applied down here, though, to these other divs. And this is where the cascading part of CSS comes in. You can apply several rules to each different element. And there's a sort of hierarchy that happens. This div is kind of like last in the hierarchy. This class, however, this is considered more specific by CSS. So it'll actually say, oh my God, like I found something that's more specific than this rule up here. So I'm going to use this instead. And they kind of like cascade over each other. So any questions about that?
There's a, oh, never mind. John said you just answered it because he was like, so the dot denotes the class. Then when you type the class name is when it's specified, correct?
Right, exactly. Yeah. The priority right here is the class. The div is considered general. The class is considered specific. So this is important, especially when you're debugging your code. You might have several rules that are applying to the same element, and it might not be doing exactly what you're thinking about. So sometimes it's good to think about that specificity because something might be more specific than another thing, and it might be overriding that. Yeah, great question. So there's something that's actually even more specific than a class. Sorry? Yeah, right on. So the thing that's more specific than a class is actually this thing down here, an ID. So this ID is considered to be the most specific thing in CSS and actually in HTML too. Whenever you create an ID, there should only be one of those on the page. I should not see another ID equals information container on the page. It's not going to break anything once again, but it's not being utilized correctly. So whenever you see an ID, that is considered the most specific thing that you can do. In order to apply, let's see, this is information container. In order to apply a style to an ID, instead of using like the period like we did up here, we just use our hashtag. And it's just like that, easy enough, right? And I think of here we could do dashed blue. Let's get really crazy with 10 pixels. So now when I go back over here, I hit refresh, we can see that it's being applied, that styling is being applied to only this one element right here. So any questions about all that?
Nothing in the chat. And for those of you who may have joined late, it's okay. If you want to continue watching, just to keep up with what's going on, there will be a recording sent out within 24 hours of the event. So no worries.
Awesome. So we've talked a little bit about selectors. This is like how we select stuff. I kind of feel like we should start fixing our web page. It looks, I mean, it looks like trash right now. I'm just going to be honest. I kind of want to start with the images and then like kind of take requests for like the next thing to fix, the next thing to fix. So let's start with these images. They are way too big, right? This dog is absolutely massive. This is, yeah. Let's see if we can like make all of these a uniform size. So if I wanted to select just one of these images, how would I go about doing this? Yeah. Sorry, what was that? Yeah, we can 100%.
Someone in the chat here says you can give it a class or an ID, add an ID.
Yeah, so we can find it in the HTML and we can 100% add a class or an ID to it. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just gonna add, let's do an ID just to be specific. And let's add, let's say first image.
There's also a question in the chat about, do you have to check the images for copyright? Or did you have this like on your, in your actual computer and you're pulling it up?
That is a great question. I pulled these images, I believe, off of Unsplash, which has like I forget what that's called, but it's like an open commons type of thing.
And then, yeah, Unsplash was mentioned, pixels.com. Yeah, basically stock images that you can use for free.
Yeah, if you're unfamiliar with Unsplash, it's great. You can get all sorts of stock images of different, just anything that somebody has decided to photograph, and it's a really handy way for you to, you know, grab these things. I don't remember if I actually got these off Unsplash. I don't remember. Needless to say, I don't remember if these are copyrighted or not. If they are, let me know right away so that I can take them.
And then we have one additional question. Is an ID of puppy okay? Like putting that in like the terms puppy instead of the image itself?
Sorry, so putting the ID in.
Like, I guess they're asking like if you can just name it puppy.
So just name it puppy, like right
Yeah,
there?
yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%. The only thing that you have to match is if I have ID puppy right here, I have to make sure that down here, I'm still using that exact same name.
Got it.
Yeah.
And what is the main difference between ID and class?
So the main difference is specificity. ID is more specific, so it has a higher priority and will override stuff more readily than the class. You had a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if the identifying the image ING ID equals
Mhm.
and then source, which is
Right.
Can you repeat the question when you get the chance?
Yeah, the question was just about the syntax, making sure that it's like ID equals puppy and then source. Technically, the order doesn't really matter too much right here.
source has
So we need the source right here. The source is basically saying, hey, I want to grab an image from the internet, and this is where it's located. Awesome. So we're going to do something to this puppy. Well, we're not going to do anything to this puppy. I take that back. We're going to do something to this puppy image. I'm so sorry. I've
No,
killed
it's totally fine. we got some laughing emojis going too.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to change the width of this image. Right now, this image is like entirely too big for our web page. Like I have to scroll all the way over here in order to see it. So in order to better fit the width of this web page, we're going to use this, which is very simple, width. We can hard code the width if we want to. We can say like, hey, I want that to be 200 pixels. And this is one of those things you can often play around with it in order to get it just right. So right here, if I do 200 pixels and I refresh, oh, beautiful, that's a really tiny image. We probably don't want that. I can also use percentile. So if I was to say like 50%, that percent is going to be a percentage of the, essentially like the container that is containing it. So if I say 50%, it's going to be 50% of that div that's inside of. That div is going to probably pretend like it's going to be like the entire width of the screen. In fact, it is if we're looking right here. So if I do a refresh right here, now my dog is about 50% the width of a screen. Yeah, and that makes it responsive so that if you're having trouble, like figuring out what this is going to look like on a computer versus what it's going to look like on mobile, you can use those percentages in order to say, hey, this is just going to be 50% of the screen. Let's not worry about pixels.
There's a question, does the percentage scale across multiple devices? So like if you're using your cell phone or a tablet or something like that?
Yeah, 100%. That percentage is going to scale to your screen width.
Awesome.
If you very specifically want this to be like the width of your screen, instead of 50%, you can also do this 50 VW, and that stands for view width. And that can be, that's like right here, that's just like another way of doing the same thing. Do a refresh. Our pup is the same size. So I'm noticing that our puppy is absolutely gorgeous. Look at the sheen on that fur, but the picture is not really centered, right? We want this to be in the center of the screen. Earlier, in order to get something centered, we use this text-align center. The puppy is not technically text. If I do the same thing right here, it doesn't work for us, right? However, one of the things that I can do is I can give this a margin. And has anybody like played around with margins before? Is this something that's familiar to folks? No? For the prep work?
Yeah, some people said, and padding too. Like, can you do padding with the margins?
Yeah. Padding and margin are in a lot of ways very similar. The idea behind margin or padding has to do with this thing called the box model. Everything that is an HTML element, it has like the element itself, like the image, whatever, but it also has margin and padding, and that margin and padding are essentially like the white space that you get around it, if that makes sense. So if we say margin, let's go crazy, 100 pixels. When I go back over here and I hit refresh, now there's an 100 pixel margin between my image right here and the edge of this div. And we can actually use this in order to center our div, or sorry, center our puppy. So I know that my puppy is going to be 50% the width of the screen. I'm going to change this back to %. And therefore, I want to have like 25% of the screen roughly on either side, right? So just like I did below, using like 100%, whatever, I can now do 25% right here. And that should be roughly centered. The problem that, as you can see, is that we have now created this massive margin, like on the top, it's going to be at the bottom. That's not really what we want, right? So to be even more specific, we can just say, okay, instead of just margin, I want to say like margin left. So the margin on the left-hand side is going to be 25%. And voila, just like that. We've got our puppy centered.
We have 2 questions in the chat. Just can you explain why you used margin and not padding in this example?
The way that margins, that's a great question. In this case, margin or padding doesn't matter too much. However, padding does matter if you have some sort of container element. So the red dots right here are a container for our image. And if I was to add padding to, let's see, image container right here. That padding is determining how far away from the border, essentially from the edge of the container it is. If I was to change this over to margin, not margin left, just good old fashioned margin. Let's comment that out real fast. Now that margin is determining how far away from the border, essentially like the edges of the container, like the actual HTML element starts.
Then John asked if, I know we're at like, I think it's 50 VW or the percentage wise. If you set it through pixels, will that scale across devices as well?
If you set it to pixels, no, that will not scale across the devices. And that's just because different screens have different pixel widths.
Got it. And then sorry, Will asked why do we use hashtag puppy instead of .puppy? I think that's just because we named it.
Right. So the reason that we're using hashtag puppy right here is because if we go back to index.html, we gave, where are we?
It's right there at 23.
Yeah, we gave this image an ID, and the way that we select things by ID is to just use that hashtag. Correct. Totally different from class. If we want to use a class, we use the period. If we want to use ID, we use the hashtag.
Is there a reason that you don't use .puppy in that example?
Well, if we don't use, if we were to change this to .puppy, like this would technically be calling on a class. And we haven't specified like the puppy class right here. I could change this over to puppy if I want to, but I'm just gonna leave it as ID because this is like the only puppy that we have. And that makes it like more specific. And specificity allows us to be like, hey, I'm going to just specifically like grab this HTML element.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Cool. Any other questions before we continue going?
We're good on this side.
All right, awesome. So this is more or less how we're going to be allowed to like specify like, hey, I want to change this, I want to do this. One of the things that I definitely promised is that we were going to add some like nice animations and transition effects, and I would love to do that. So how would we feel if, okay, let's refresh that. How would we feel if we started out with all these pictures being black and white, just totally grayscale? And then when we hover over them, that's when like the color comes out. Like it's just like a gradual fade in. Like, I think that would be super cool, right? That's what we're gonna do.
No, people said nice. They're totally into it. Yes.
Okay.
Exclamation marks.
Awesome. I love the enthusiasm. So we are going to do a little bit of, this is called pseudo selection. It's the idea that we're going to be selecting things based on like specific events. So like if I'm hovering over something, that's considered an event. So what I'm going to do is, let's do this up here. I'm going to add a new rule for all the images. Actually, I'm going to switch that back real fast. I'm going to get rid of these things. I'm going to add a new rule for all images, and I want the ability to make them grayscale. The way that we're going to do that is, I'm actually blanking on this.
Happens to the best of us.
It happens to the best of us.
Someone put colon hover.
Sorry?
Someone put colon the word hover.
Ooh, you're actually jumping ahead. You're really savvy.
Oh, Joyce, you're killing it,
we're
Joyce.
not quite there. So the thing that I want to do is I want to add a blur effect. One of the nice things that we can do if we have no idea what we're doing, I swear to God, I know exactly what I'm doing, is we can do a quick internet search. This is actually how I learned CSS, is just by constantly being like, oh my God, I want to do this cool thing. If you search on the internet, W3 Schools is fantastic for telling you all the different things that you can do. I'm just going to type in right here, CSS image gray. grayscale. Okay, cool. W3 schools is the first thing that pops up. And sure enough, it immediately gives us a just like a quick rule that we can use. And this is exactly what we're going to start out with. We want this filter and we want to say grayscale 100%. So I'm going to copy that. I'll paste that right there. And now when we go over to our intro to CSS and to our HTML page and I give it a little refresh, all of our images are going to be in black and white. So we haven't yet done anything to make it so that when we hover over them, something happens. If I'm hovering over our little pup right here, he just looks really sad because it's in grayscale. So we are at this point going to do a pseudo selector, which is what somebody in the chat was talking about. This is going to be a new rule. We first start out by saying, hey, I want to do image. And then when we add in this colon, this is actually giving me a list of all the different things that you can do, but in my case, we want that hover. And the hover is basically saying, okay, when we have hovered our mouse over it, we're going to do something a little bit different. And in this case, we're going to do the exact same thing, filter, grayscale. But this time, we're just going to say 0%. Hey, what's up? Is there a specific reason I'm doing this before which image? Why I did that right there as opposed to down there. Yeah, gotcha. There's not a specific reason. I like to kind of collect things into groups, and in this case, like I have like the H1, the div up here. As you can see, these are like general tags. I also have like the image container right here, and I'm just kind of like, okay, this feels like a good place in order to do that. Yeah, if I wanted to, I could take all this stuff and just put it all the way down at the bottom, and it'll still work.
And just so you know that there is people who are getting it to work on the chat, so they're really excited about that.
Nice, right on. Yeah, let's go ahead and try it ourselves. Let's do a little refresh right here. And if I hover over our puppy, oh my God, look at that.
He comes to life.
He comes to life. I hope this real puppy is getting this much attention.
That puppy is getting belly rubs every day.
Yes. Yes, so this is applied because we're saying image hover and image is just generic. This is applying to all of our images. If I hover over our raccoon jumps into color. If I hover over our fox is now in color. So this is applying to all of our images.
I have a question. It looks like, so when you hover, it changes it immediately from gray to color. Is there a way to time it so that it slowly comes into color? That might be a little too advanced for today, but as someone who sees a lot of these events, I wonder if that's a question others have as well.
That is exactly where we were about to go, actually.
Oh, I'm like Joyce. I'm getting ahead of your lecture. Sorry.
No. That's actually perfect. That's a perfect segue to our to like the next thing that we're going to be doing. So, as you pointed out, that's like a very quick jump from no color to full color. We want this to happen gradually, right? So this is where our transition effect comes in. Generally, if you're going to have a transition effect, you don't want to do it in the pseudo selector. You want to do it in just like whatever the base like image thing is. And that's because that will, the transition effect would only apply while we're hovering right here. Whereas with this, it will always apply. The thing that we're going to add is transition, and transition takes in a few arguments. I believe that the first argument it's going to take in is what are we trying to like kind of change? In this case, we're trying to change that filter. And the reason that we're choosing filter is because this is the rule that we want to kind of like massage and change into something else. So we're going to say filter. And the other thing that we want to do is we want to give it like the amount of time that's going to take for it to effectively happen. We can do like 1 second right here. We can do like 2 seconds. We can do like, if we want something that happens like really fast, we can do just like a 0.2 seconds. These are all valid. In my case, I'm going to start out with 1 second and see how that feels. So I'm going to jump over here. We're going to do another little refresh. And now when I hover over you, oh, that's so nice. That's so gradual.
Exactly what I envisioned when I asked the question.
I'm glad. So any questions about that?
Those of you in the chat, have you been able to see that work for you?
Okay, yeah, 100%. I can show the code again.
It's working great for those online, so this is awesome.
Glad to hear it. Question?
If we want to do
Yes, the question was whether or not we can add that transition to something that has an ID. 100% we can do that. You can actually, so this pseudo selector hover right here, we can actually add that to anything that has a class or an ID as well, just by adding like the little colon hover right there. So if I was to, sorry, I apologize, y'all. So if I wanted to, I could do something special for puppy, where I can create another rule for puppy, add in the pseudo selector for hover. And we can make it so that instead of, I feel like this is going to be kind of sad. Instead of doing like the grayscale back up to 100%, like now it's only going to be 50%. And now when I do a refresh, that's not going to be as vibrant as this raccoon down here. One other really nice thing that we can do, let's say that one of the things that I have often found is that if you want somebody to be able to interact with somebody, then you add in these transition effects so that it becomes clear to them that, you know, this is something that you can interact with. You know, maybe this would, you could click on the puppy and they'd get like a little bit bigger. One of the other things that we can do in order to signal that to our users is right now, if I have the cursor just like over the puppy, it's just kind of like, okay, it's a normal cursor, whatever. But what if we wanted to make this look like the cursor for a link, like one of those like, you know, like pointing signs? Yeah, 100%. We can apply that to the raccoon instead. So if I want to apply that to the raccoon, I could go down here. I could give this an idea of raccoon. And then, yeah, let's just do a new rule right here.
Another question. So back to what you were saying, the cascade rule, because it's ID, that's why
Right, right.
It took that probably
Yeah, exactly. This is the question was about like, is the like image hover, like the cascading thing coming into play? And yes, absolutely. We have a more general rule that's for the image right here. And then when we hover over it, this rule kind of cascades on top of it and says, hey, instead of being grayscale 100%, let's do grayscale 0%. Yeah, great question. So, all right, perfect. So we've created a new rule for our raccoon. We're saying cursor pointer. And now when I do a quick refresh, in order to kind of signal to our viewers that this raccoon is something that we can actually click on and do stuff with, my cursor has changed to that little pointer finger. And that's like an indicator to my users that you can click on the raccoon and mischief will follow. Yeah.
There was a question about it with the CSS. Can you make images rotate or spin?
Yes. Okay, cool. That's actually perfect for the last thing that we want to do. This is going to look super silly, but we're going to make it happen. We are going to introduce like an initial animation that fires when people get to our website. This can be helpful if you want, something like a window to kind of like pop in or like slide in from the side or something like that. In this case, we want to make it so that our images, when somebody jumps into the site, are going to just randomly start rotating for like a second. I don't know.
No, that would be awesome. I think that would be exciting.
So in order to do that, we need to use something called keyframes. If you've worked with animation before, this is a term that'll probably be familiar to you. CSS has keyframes as well, and we signal it by saying like @keyframes right here. And we can give it some sort of identifier. In this case, I'm just going to call it rotate. You don't have to call it rotate. Maybe like rotate image.
I just want you to know the chat, someone said to your suggestion about spinning, let's get wild. So they're excited about it.
Okay, cool. We're about to get very wild right here. So we're going to create this keyframe rule, and we append it with @keyframes like this. We give it a name. The name itself doesn't matter too much, just so long as it makes sense to you. I'm going to call it rotate image. And then we basically tell it, there are a few different ways that we can do this. I like to basically start with a 0%. 0% staying like, hey, this is the start of the animation, as opposed to 100%, which we'll get to in a minute, which is the end of the animation. 0% is going to take some brackets, and inside of these brackets, it's just like the brackets that are up here. We can put in any sort of styling rule that we want to. In my case, I want to do transform rotate 0deg. And basically what this is saying is I want to do a transformation on this, and that's going to be a rotation of nothing. We're going to start with that rotation of nothing so that it has some sort of base point. Once we've gotten the base point established, yeah, exactly. We need to tell it where to finish. I don't know if I said what deg is. Deg is just 0 degrees. And how wild does chat want to go right here?
Chat, how wild do you guys want to go? Oh, wild. Super wild, really wild.
Wild.
Jungle wild, as wild as possible.
Okay.
The virtual audience is ready for some fun.
So I'm thinking 1080. We could get wilder. I'm afraid. I'll just be honest. And this is basically going to say, okay, cool. So we're going to start total level, and then I want you to spin it 1080 degrees. So as it is, this keyframe rule doesn't do anything by itself. We have to tell the image that it's now going to have an animation. And the way we do that easily enough is we say, hey, animation. We can tell it which animation we want to use. So we're going to say rotate image. We need to give it a time frame. So 1080 sounds really scary. So we're just going to do 2 seconds. And in addition, we can give it a specific like animation curve. You can do just like a very quick ease in or ease out. You can do like, if you want to get really fancy, you could do like a cubic Bezier. I tend to just do like a linear. I know. That's not necessarily meant to mean anything to anybody.
There's a question. Why is there a bracket? I thought they were used for ending a function only. The curly bracket. I think for the rotate, there's curly brackets there. So it's like, why is there a bracket, curly bracket there? I thought they were only used for function.
Yeah, good question. So the reason that we have a curly bracket right here is because we have a bracket up here in order to say like, hey, we're going to be like doing like these specific keyframe steps. And then inside of these brackets are the actual styles that we want to implement. So the bracket right here is basically saying, hey, a new style is going to be started right here.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. So are we I'm really scared of what this is going to look like. We ready to see what this looks like?
That's it. Drum roll, guys. Whoa.
Oh my God, it is party time. So every time that we load up, this is what our website is going to look like. And then it's going to stop after those 2 seconds. And that's just because we specified right here, hey, I want you to do that 2 seconds. If we leave this blank, I believe it gives us like a pretty nice, easy animation curve. Yeah, and it just like kind of slows to a halt right there. So that's actually kind of nice. Let's keep that.
We got some cools. I love it. Amazing website. Probably one of the best ones I've seen. LMAO. Loved it so much. This is awesome.
So sorry, your spinning is also spinning the text. Okay, that might be where, because of where the selector is. You add that to image right here. Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, if you, no worries. If you move that up into like just the image right here, you'll be able to see that. Not that there's anything wrong with spinning the whole container. Right on. Awesome. So that's pretty much it for me. Do we have any last minute thoughts, questions, deep-seated concerns, deep dark desires?
I'm not seeing any in the chat right now. But yeah, Chet, this has been, first of all, for one of my first hybrid events, I think this was pretty awesome and really helpful. Yeah, some people want to know, can you make it spin like a clock? What about bringing in from left to right? And these sorts of things. Is there anything that you can suggest for those? But outside of that, I don't see many questions. It's been awesome.
Yeah, right on. If you have questions about that stuff, a lot of these are things that other people have already tried and done on the internet. I would 100% say just do a Google search and you'll be able to find something. People love sharing this stuff. The coding community is great about like, hey, I did this really cool thing. Hey, look at my code, come plagiarize my code. So yeah, absolutely, like take a look on the internet, see what other folks have done, because that can that's helpful not only because, you know, you're teaching yourself, but you're able to get those additional perspectives of like, oh, okay, like Chet did it this one way, but somebody else is able to do it like a completely different way. So yeah, keep playing around with that stuff, keep exploring.
Yeah, I think that's the whole point of coding, right? Is just like testing out like different variations of websites and stuff.
Yeah. Cool.
Any questions
Well, I
from the
think that's it
audience
for me.
on your
Oh, yeah.
side?
Any more questions from y'all? How are y'all feeling? Right on. Awesome.
Well, I just wanted to say thanks again, Chet, for an awesome lecture this evening. I think you did a fantastic job. Thank you to those who braved to come in person. Thank you for being there. And if you have any other questions, I'm sure you can bug Jelani or Duncan or Chet after I disconnect. And I just want to say thank you to our virtual audience. A lot of you guys, I've seen your names pop up before, and so I'm glad that you're returning to our events, but also thank you for being here and staying for the last hour and a half and learning how to work CSS and CSS animations. I hope you all have a lovely evening and hope to see you again soon.